Canada is absolutely furious at Donald Trump, but I think it's furious also kind of met with the hell are you even doing at this point? It's a loathing, but it's a mixture of loathing and mockery as Trump's just further humiliated himself. And frankly, unfortunately, I say this as an American, humiliated the United States. Here's what Donald Trump posted on Friday morning. It's a rerun. We're back to attacking Canada in social media posts with tariffs. Trump says he's ending all trade discussions with Canada and will be levying more tariffs against them in the next 7 days. Well, I guess it's not 2 weeks, but it's close to setting up the taco. Trump always chickens out. Donald Trump says the following: We have just been informed that Canada, a very difficult country to trade with, including the fact that they have charged our farmers as much as 400% tariffs for years on dairy products, has just announced they are putting on digital services taxes on our American technology companies, which is a direct and blatant attack on our country. They are obviously copying the European Union, which has done the same thing and is currently under discussion with us. Also, based on this egregious tax, we are hereby terminating all, and he puts that in caps, discussions on trade with Canada. Effective immediately, we will let Canada know the tariff that they will be paying to do business with the United States of America within the next 7 day period. Thank you for your attention to this matter! Exclamation point. Always weird when he says thank you for your attention to this matter. And by the way, one of the other things that Canadians are furious about as well, a Canadian citizen died at a Florida ICE detention facility. Someone named Johnny Noviella, 49 years old, who had pre-existing medical conditions, and ICE seems to be covering up what went down there. And I just want to remind everybody as well, and this is why it's important that we cover international news on the Midas Touch Network, because a lot of this is related and it's not being covered by corporate news in America. Right before the NATO summit at The Hague in Netherlands, there was a special EU Canada summit where Prime Minister Carney made what I think is one of the most impactful kind of statements of geopolitical relations involving the US, Canada, and Europe, at least maybe ever, but certainly in the past 50, 75 years, where Prime Minister Carney said, we're done looking at the past and no more nostalgia with America. We view ourselves as European. We're looking forward. Let me just play a short version of this because I'm sure you've seen it before. Here, play it.
So we're meeting now in that context in, as you just said, in hard times. We might say even a hinge moment of history, a world that's more dangerous and divided, a time where the rules-based international, the global order, rules-based global order is under threat, in a time when technological change is accelerating. And we really have two choices as a jurisdiction, as a country in this circumstance. We can nostalgically look back and long for the old order to somehow return, or we can build a new one with purpose and partnership. And as the most...
Let's bring in Charlie Angus, former member of Parliament. Prime Minister Carney goes on to say, we see ourselves as European in that clip. And you and I did another video on that. But Charlie, let's talk about Trump's post today, or on Friday rather. What's your reaction to it, Charlie?
I think in Canada, people probably rolled their eyes and said whatever and went back to work. Because, I mean, is anyone surprised that he did this? This is number one. This is not how you negotiate tariffs, because they're complicated issues. But he's using talking points that are just outrageous, stupid, full of lies. For example, the dairy issue. Canada doesn't have an export dairy economy. We're not competing with Wisconsin farmers. We're not trying to flood their market, but American dairy can come into Canadian markets. But there's an agreed point to keep American dairy from flooding the market, that a tariff rate applies. That's all. It's the system that we have in Canada known as supply management. Remember, Donald was announcing that he was going to bring down the price of eggs, and everyone in Canada was talking to themselves, why do we have the price of eggs? Why is it so expensive? Because the eggs haven't changed in Canada. Eggs are about half the price. because of the system that we have where we're not massively exporting our eggs or our dairy. We keep them for a domestic market. You can move into our market, but if you try and flood the market, there's the tariff. That's a reasonable thing. It's same with this digital services tax. This has been in place to be set up to come into to kick in for some time. If you want to negotiate that and change that, then that's what you do. You sit down and negotiate. I think what Donald is really freaked out is that press conference with Prime Minister Carney in the EU, where Canada made it clear we're not going to be bullied, we're not going to be pushed around, we're not going to be the junior vassal state, which Trump wants. Our future lies with Europe, so we're going to make agreements. And one of those areas is going to be on digital, which is going to give a lot more power to Canada and the EU. And Donald's freaking out. So, he blew it in Iran, so he's come back to his favorite punching bag, which is Canada. Nobody's surprised here.
This is what happens also when you breach your deals and your agreements. Like there was agreements with Canada and Mexico that Trump took NAFTA, made some changes to it and some additions, called it the USMCA, and he liked that it sounded like the YMCA, and he was bragging about that, right? And then he continues to breach his deals, breach his own agreements, act in bad faith during negotiations. Look, there are times where negotiations get challenging, but the idea of making a social media post in all caps and saying no, 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 it's just bizarre behavior. But I think what we're seeing, right, as Donald Trump's engaging in this amateurish humiliation ritual that he's dragging America through, other countries are like, we're coming up with deals and structures. We're strengthening this. We're building. We can't wait for your craziness. You can't even deal. You said it originally, many, many months ago when you and I first started speaking. You're like, you can't negotiate with the guy because he doesn't want to negotiate. Trump's goal is to humiliate, and that's it. And he ends up humiliating himself.
Well, this is so true. He came to the G7, a moment when world leaders came together to try and sort of put some stability in a destabilized world. Instead, we got Donald Trump, who blew the whole thing up and then scrammed out of Canada before he had to confront President Zelensky. Then he went to NATO in Brussels. Again, another key point where the European allies were trying to secure with the world some level of stability with the increasing violence we are seeing in Israel, Gaza, Iran, the situation with Russia. And Donald Trump came in and lit gasoline all over the place and then walked out. So, what you saw in between those two pivotal international summits was that Canada said, well, wait a minute, we've got to find a future. And it's not with this guy, and it's not with the United States. We have American officials hosting meetings claiming that Canada is some kind of terrorist haven. They're saying that we're sending massive gangs of El Salvadorians over the Canadian border. I'm sorry. You've ever visited Canada? Could you show us where we have our El Salvadorian gangs? I think what next? They're going to find weapons of mass destruction in a bunker in some nice leafy suburb in Canada. The language that Trump is using against Canada is actually having a hugely detrimental effect on American businesses because Canadians are pulling out. Canadians are not traveling there. So I don't know what Prime Minister Carney will do in response to this latest temper tantrum by President Taco. Certainly, when we see that he's throwing around issues like non-existent threats like dairy, it's more of his bad theater, but we've seen the show so many times. We know the punchlines. It's not funny. Nobody gets upset. So I think Canada's just going to have to do what it's going to do. We'll probably have to go back pound for pound, dollar for dollar in trade retaliations as we watch the American economy get weaker and more unsure because who is going to invest right now? Who's going to start moving product for the American economy when Donald Trump is blowing things up every chance he can get?
It's the rhetoric of Putin too, right? Like the way Putin says we're going into Ukraine to denazify a country that has a Jewish leader in President
Yeah.
Zelensky, and people go, "That's crazy." But that's Trump saying Canada has fentanyl. It's crazy, but they use these crazy things as pretext, and it's all about the big lie. The bigger the lie, the more people like, huh? And then they use that as justification for their authoritarian aims. What are the people telling you? You speak with lots of businesses, you speak with lots of workers. What's the current sentiment right now of Canadian people, Canadian business, with respect to Americans, the United States, Trump?
I think what's really telling is that, if we had crazy Marjorie Taylor Greene Republicans saying that Canada was a haven for terrorism and that we were untrustworthy and we were the worst country to negotiate with, most Canadians would say, well, that's just American politics. Don't think about too much. But when you're putting into power your ambassadors, your heads of the FBI, your people in terms of international security, and they are uh, promoting the lies and the misinformation, then it becomes very clear to Canada that we don't have a neighbor that's an ally anymore. We have a serious problem and a threat because it's a nation not under the rule of law. So I get such a determination from Canadians. Canadians are not crossing that border. They're not going back. There's a huge charm offensive going on. Poor senators and governors trying to get us to come back. We're not coming back. I think it's giving Mark Carney a lot more political power, even though he has technically a minority government and he could be challenged at any time by a vote in the House of Commons. But it gives Mark Carney a lot more leeway, I think, to make tough decisions because people know that who he's dealing with is a man you simply can't trust. What he says today, he will break tomorrow. And if that's the case, then Canada will be making longer term decisions about our future, like our alliances with Europe, and that's going to ultimately lead to a major drop off in the back and forth trade that we all just took for granted, crossing the border back and forth, all the goods that cross back and forth. There's going to have to be major realignments of our economy because of this threat. But I think Canada's set for it. My question is what's going to happen in the United States, where there doesn't seem to be this sense of needing to address the threat. They're just hoping Donald Trump will get his way and he'll show the art of the deal. Nah, that ain't gonna happen.
It's a fog that gets cast over the disaster that he's creating. And in many ways, it makes it worse than if there was just one massive hit the United States took and you saw this big crash and then you can deal with it because it's this Ponzi scheme economy. It's a Bernie Madoff style economy, and the media in America is complicit, kind of covering it up and trying to figure it out, but it's all going in the wrong direction. Worse, others in the world see it and they're able to maneuver. It's why we see the dollar crashing, why we see, other countries and alliances becoming, looked to more as being far more stable than the US. Finally, Donald Trump and his regime watch this. We know they follow this closely. We know they follow your videos closely as you become a leader in the resistance movement with the millions of Canadians as well, shoulder to shoulder with you. So, as Donald Trump has attacked Canada yet again on Friday, what is your message to the Trump regime, Charlie Angus?
Well, Donald, no offense, but you're getting really tiresome. Nobody believes you anymore. You stomp your feet, you threaten mass action. We saw you demand regime change, and the next day you pulled the General Taco routine, and we were begging Iran and Israel to come back to the table and stop fighting after you poured gasoline. This does not look like a leader who's in charge of the free world or a leader who's in charge of anything. So you were threatening us. You've always threatened us. Your officials are ramping up their rhetoric against us. It only makes us more determined. Is this going to be a long, tough, hard slog? Yes. Our job's going to be lost? Yes. We get that as Canadians. What you need to explain, Donald, is why you've left the United States weaker, more isolated, left your people more frightened, a sense that they don't belong if they travel anywhere in the world. I'm hearing from people around the world about American travelers. American travelers are still welcome in Canada as long as, hey, just don't wear a MAGA hat. But you've left the American people dangerously isolated. And as long as your officials are making outrageous claims that Canada is the terrorist threat, that Canada is the problem for your gangs, that Canada's border is the biggest issue you've got to deal with, you are obviously not dealing with the real issues that the American people voted for you. So It's going to be what it's going to be, Donald. Just get off social media for a while. If you want to come back to the table and negotiate your digital services tax or anything else, hey, we're ready. But if you're not, we're moving on.
Charlie Angus, former member of parliament, leader in the resistance in Canada, thanks for joining us as always.
Thank you so much.
Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers.
Can't get enough Midas? Check out the Midas Plus Substack for ad-free articles, reports, podcasts, daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, and more. Sign up for free now at MidasPlus.com.